No matter how hard she tried, Marinette couldn't hide her smile. Yesterday with Adrian had been everything. Well, not at first. It had almost immediately ended in disaster because both of them thought the other one hated them. But Adrian didn't hate her, and that thought alone was almost enough for her to start writing her wedding vows to him. She shook her head, as if erasing the thought from her mind as she walked to school. It was too soon for that. Like, a lot too soon. But they were friends, and they were talking, and he was going to come over soon to give her another lesson. It couldn't get much better than this. Marinette! She looked up, not realising that she'd managed to walk into school without falling on her face, despite thinking of Adrian the whole way here. She gave Alia, the one who shouted her name, a smile, and her best friend hurried over to her. "Is there something wrong?" Alia asked. Marinette shook her head. "Why would it be? You're 20 minutes early to school." Marinette looked around, finally registering that she was stood in the school courtyard, surrounded by other students. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been this early. Oh, weird. But nothing's wrong. I'm just really happy. Her smile got even wider and Alia smirked. "I take it things went well with Adrian then?" Marinette nodded. "It was a bit awkward at first. He thought I didn't like him and that I'd only asked him to teach me Mandarin because of my mum, and I told him I thought he didn't like me because he never said thank you for the scarf. Turns out, he thought the scarf was from his dad. He had no idea it was from me at all. Yeah, I did tell you to give it to him, as in actually to him, not deliver it to him through Natalie. I know, and then he asked me why I couldn't give it to him myself, and I blurted out he made me nervous, so I had to make up a reason why, and told him it was because of his dad." Alia smirked. "Ah, yes, because you have a crush on Gabriel. I remember now." Marinette glared at her best friend. "For the last time, I do not have a crush on Gabriel Agreste. But anyway, it went really well after that. It was actually quite fun, and turns out I'm quite good at Mandarin. Or maybe I was just paying more attention because it was Adrian teaching me. Yeah, probably. Oh, look who just came into school." Marinette turned around and immediately blushed when she saw Adrian just entering the school, the blue scarf she had made him hanging around his neck. He stopped walking, eyes scanning around the courtyard, and then he smiled when he saw Marinette, and her blush got even worse. But as he walked over to her, she didn't feel nervous. She was excited to talk to him again. "Ni hao," he said when he was close enough. "Ni hao," Marinette said back. "You remember?" She laughed. "Of course I do. I looked over my notes this morning." He smiled wider. "That's good. Keep practicing. Actually, I'm not sure when your next lesson will be. I've got a lot of photo shoots coming up, plus fencing and stuff." "Oh, well, if you're allowed, you can come by after fencing. It doesn't have to be straight after school." She knew Adrian was always busy, so if they waited until he was free right after school, she'd probably be waiting months to spend time with him alone again. Her heart was pounding in her chest, hoping he'd say yes. That could probably work. I'd have to talk to Natalie first. "Here." Adrian took his phone out of his pocket and unlocked it. "Put your number in so I can text you to arrange stuff. Or just talk, you know?" Marinette completely missed how nervous he looked as he spoke. "I'd love to," she said. "Talk, I mean, and put my number in. Yeah, that too." Hands shaking slightly, Marinette took his phone and managed to put her name and number in, then handed it back to him. "I'll text you my number later. Alia, have you seen Nino? He's in the classroom already. You should probably help him, actually. He hasn't done the maths homework." Adrian nodded. "I'll see you up there. Bye, Marinette." "Bye," she said with a small wave, and with one last smile, Adrian turned and left. "That was seriously impressive, girl," Alia said as soon as the blonde model was out of earshot. "Oh, was it? It's not that impressive. Ni hao just means hello." Alia rolled her eyes. "I know what it means. I meant the way you spoke to Adrian. There was no way you could have done that this time yesterday." "Well, he's like you said. He's a normal boy. Nothing to be scared of." "True, but..." Alia glanced over at Adrian's retreating back. "I don't think so." "What do you mean? Did you not see how nervous he was when he asked for your number?" Marinette shook her head. She'd been too worried about dropping his phone or putting in the wrong number to notice. "Oh, hold on. Did she put the right number in? Did she even spell her name right? Oh god, did she put an embarrassing emoji after it? She had to steal Adrian's phone and... Marinette!" She jumped and looked at Alia. "Sorry, what did you say?" "I asked you if you noticed how nervous Adrian looked." Marinette shook her head again. It was probably nothing. And if he did, it was probably due to my dad. He did not like Adrian. At all. I don't want to know what will happen if my dad finds out Adrian has my number now. Alia started laughing. Your dad went all overprotective on you over Adrian Agreste, who is literally the sweetest teenage boy to ever set foot in Paris? Well, apart from Nino. I have to know all of the details. She dragged Marinette over to the nearest bench and the girls started to gossip and Adrian couldn't help but turn back to get another glance at Marinette. She had looked so much happier compared to yesterday morning. He guessed he really did make her nervous. But after having all night to weigh up whether or not she had feelings for him, he was 80% certain it was because of how she felt about him, rather than worry associated with his father. Although, to be fair, one look from that man would have made you paranoid for a decade. He finally went upstairs and then into his classroom, and sure enough, Nino was sat at their desk, writing in his maths book. Need any help? The blonde asked. Nino didn't even look up. Nah, dude, I'm almost done. There. He closed the book, then sat back in his chair, hands behind his head. Someone looks happy. I do? Adrian asked, sitting down beside his best friend. You do. This wouldn't have anything to do with yesterday's Mandarin lesson, would it? Adrian automatically blushed. Well, actually, I wanted to talk to you about that. About Marinette, I mean. Nino propped his feet up on the desk. Spill the beans, dude. I'm not certain, which is why I've come to ask you, but what do you do if you think a girl likes you? Nino let out a short laugh. Is this in relation to Marinette? Yes. Why? Oh, well, she just, girls are tricky. It's hard to tell if they have feelings for you, and Marinette is difficult to read. Adrian frowned. Haven't you known her for years? Yeah, dude, but, we're not super mad close, She just, the blonde raised an eyebrow. You're not very good at this. Nino groaned. Ugh, fine. Yes, Marinette has a crush on you, but you can't tell her or Alia I told you. They'd kill me. Adrian completely disregarded the second half of what Nino said and started smiling, his heartbeat speeding up a little. She has a crush on me? Well, yeah, man. I thought it was obvious with the way she looked at you. He shook his head. I never noticed. I thought she hated me. You have a lot to learn about girls. Case in point, the way you look at Marinette. Adrian narrowed his eyes. I look at her a certain way? Nino hummed as he brought his feet back down. Like a kicked puppy. Like she stood on your little toe. Like a woman as she goes into labour. The model narrowed his eyes. That's oddly specific. Look, dude, I was old enough to remember my mum when Chris was being born. No wonder she was in pain. He's basically the Antichrist. Adrian glanced around the classroom, thankful it was empty so no one was around to listen to their conversation. What does this have to do with Marinette? Oh, nothing, man. But how to handle Marinette? I've known her for ages. She's just shy, especially around you, since she has a crush on you. If you're going to talk to her, until she gets more comfortable, you've got to be the one leading the conversation. But don't come on too strong. Be gentle, dude. She's like a baby bunny. Sudden movement's going to scare her. Adrian hummed, remembering that Marinette wasn't immediately comfortable with him yesterday. Nino had a good approach, and then he smiled, imagining Marinette with bunny ears. She was already cute, but she'd be adorable like that. You're doing that face again. The model quickly came back to reality. Sorry, I was thinking about Marinette. With bunny ears? Nino scowled. I thought models were meant to be cool. I am cool. Maybe you could try to be like 20% cooler. Adrian groaned. Have you been watching My Little Pony again? You know it's for children, right? Nino rolled his lips together. Adrian Agreste, my dude. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, is a contemporary cinematic masterpiece, and I will fight anyone who disagrees with me. Yeah, and I think the first person in line for the fight will be Alia when she finds out you have a crush on Rainbow Dash. You have a crush on a cartoon horse? The two boys looked up and saw that Marinette and Alia had come into the classroom, both of them with their eyebrows raised as they looked at Nino. What? No, of course I don't. Alia shook her head. I knew there was something going on. She stormed back out of the classroom and Nino didn't hesitate to run after her. Alia, babe, it's nothing, I swear. Marinette and Adrian immediately started laughing, but when neither Alia nor Nino returned, the blonde glanced nervously at the classroom doorway. Should we go and look for them, he asked. She shook her head. They'll be fine, it was just a joke. But, Adrian couldn't help but smile as he watched Marinette's cheeks tinge pink as she stepped closer to his desk. Yes, he asked, encouraging her. I know I already said thank you last night, but I wanted to thank you again. For the Mandarin lesson. It was amazing. It was no problem at all. I love getting to spend some time with you. Her blush deepened. Me too. She made a brief second of eye contact with him before she got too shy and scuttled over to her seat. For once, Nino had been right with his advice. All Adrian had to do was not act so eager around Marinette, or it would make her uncomfortable. Although he wasn't sure how easy it would be to not act anything other than excited around her now he knew she returned his feelings. Adrian's school bag thumped against one leg, his fencing bag on the other, as he walked the short distance from school to Marinette's house. It was a week after he and Marinette had exchanged phone numbers, and Natalie had cleared today after fencing for him so he could go and spend time with Marinette. No, wait, not spend time with her, teach her Mandarin. If he kept thinking like that, he wouldn't be able to concentrate well enough to give Marinette a decent enough lesson. But at least this time, Marinette was already feeling more comfortable around him. She was talking to him more at school, and they were also texting each other at the weekends. He'd been so nervous when he'd asked for her number, afraid she'd say no for absolutely no logical reason, but he'd still been worried. Thankfully she hadn't, and after testing the waters, it turned out that Marinette liked it when he sent the occasional cat meme to her, and in turn, he just liked it whenever she texted him, whatever it was about. Seeing his phone screen flash with Marinette's name was enough to make his heartbeat speed up. He crossed the road to the bakery, closed sign now on the door, but the light still on inside. He guessed Marinette's parents were starting to prepare for tomorrow. He didn't know how they did it every day, especially when it was nearing 6 in the evening now. After a long day, he just wanted to relax, but at least teaching Marinette Mandarin would be something fun. Adrian walked around to the side door, but as he raised his hand to knock, the door opened, revealing Marinette. "Hey," he said, a little surprised. "Hey," she said. She was a little quieter than at school, when she had Alia around for backup, but she was nowhere near as tense as she was at the start of their last lesson. "Sorry, I was on my balcony and saw you walking, so I came down to let you in." "Isn't it a bit dark now to be on your balcony?" he asked. It might have only been 6 in the evening, but it was the start of February, and it was already dark at this time of year. She shrugged. "I like it up there, nice and quiet." Adrian nodded. He could understand that, and he was sure Marinette would look pretty, illuminated by the lights of Paris, watching the colourful reflections of the stained glass windows from Notre Dame on the surface of the Seine. "Adrian? He looked back at her with a smile. He really needed to stop daydreaming about Marinette. "I asked if you wanted a drink." "Oh, just some water, please." Marinette smiled and went upstairs, and Adrian put his fencing bag at the foot of the stairs. He wouldn't be needing it. He stuck his head into the back room of the bakery, where Tom and Sabine were preparing the croissants for tomorrow. "Hi, Sabine." "Hi, Mr. Dupin." The two adults both turned around, Sabine giving him a warm smile, and Tom giving him a glare. "Oh, it's you," Tom said. Sabine rolled her eyes. "How have you been, Adrian?" "I've been good, thank you. Just busy with everything." She nodded. "Marinette said you do a lot. She really is grateful for you taking time out to help her. And so am I. So, I was wondering if you'd like to stay for dinner tonight?" Tom looked at his wife in alarm. "I'm sorry, what?" Taking Sabine's lead, Adrian also ignored Tom. "I'd love to. I'll have to ask Natalie for permission, but I think it should be fine." "Wonderful. We'll eat when you're done teaching Marinette." "Okay, I'll head up and see her now." Tom glared at him again. "And leave the hatch open." "Yes, Mr. Dupin. Have a nice evening." "Don't tell me what to do." "Tom, you're being ridiculous." Adrian held in his laugh as he left the back room and started climbing the stairs. As much as Marinette's dad did scare him, he would endure it if it meant he got to be with her. And some of the stuff Tom said was funny, even if it was said in an attempt to scare him off. He entered the kitchen and living room, and when Marinette was nowhere to be seen, he climbed up to her room. She was just setting 2 glasses of water down on the desk, and when she heard the stairs creak, Marinette turned and smiled at him. "Oh, hey, I was going to come back down and get you." He returned her smile, loving how cosy her room looked with the lights on. They bounced off the painted walls, giving the room a warm pink glow. "It's okay," he said. "I remember the way. And your mum asked me to stay for dinner." Marinette's eyes widened. She did?" Adrian nodded as he got his phone out. "Is that okay with you?" "Yeah, of course. It's totally fine. Everything's fine. It'll be fine. Fine." She trailed off and made a weird squeaking noise. He guessed she was a little shy at the prospect of having dinner with him and her parents, especially since it seemed like she had no idea that it was happening until just now. "Are you sure?" he asked as he quickly typed out a text to Natalie. He hit send, then looked back up at Marinette. Thankfully, she smiled at him. Yeah, I just hope my dad isn't too harsh on you. Adrian laughed as he went over to sit down at the desk. I'll be fine. You ready to start? Marinette nodded and sat down too, both of them getting out their materials. And once Adrian had had some water, he opened up the textbook. You've been practicing then, he asked. Yep, I keep asking my mum what her honourable last name is. Adrian laughed. Good. So this time, we're going to go a bit further with introductions and getting to know someone, like their job and where they're from. Marinette frowned. We're students. Neither of us have jobs. Speak for yourself, I'm a model. Haven't you seen my very extensive portfolio? The way he said it was meant to be a joke, but Marinette immediately blushed. Yes. I mean no, never, ever, well, wait, some of it? Adrian chuckled. I'd hope so, it's plastered all over the city. But for today, both of our occupation is like you said, a student. It counts, I think. So, do you remember the word for Mr.? Xianxiang, Marinette said without any hesitation. She didn't really know how to go about trying to get Adrian to fall in love with her since she was too scared to flirt with him, but she'd studied hard, hoping she could impress him with how dedicated she was to him. No, wait, how dedicated to Mandarin she was, not him. And now wasn't the time for embarrassing thoughts like that either. Perfect. So in this situation, even though you found out my name is Adrian, you should address me as Xianxiang, okay? And do you remember the word for you? Ni, Marinette said, exaggerating the tone, and it earned a laugh out of Adrian. He didn't laugh that often in school, which was a shame. She thought the sound was beautiful. But then again, she thought most things to do with Adrian were. Wonderful. So the next word is the verb to be, and here it's used to say is or are. The word is shi. It's a bit difficult to pronounce at first. I found it easier to keep my teeth pressed together for it. Shi. Marinette mimicked him and Adrian smiled. You're really good at this, he said. She just shrugged at the praise. I always pay attention to you. I mean, you're just, well... He watched as her face turned bright pink, but Marinette's speech started to fumble more and more as she carried on talking. Heeding Nino's words, he gently laid his hand on top of hers. It's okay. I know you sometimes get lost when you talk. Adrian knew that was partly a lie. Marinette only went like this when she spoke to him, and now he knew why that was, but he didn't mind it at all. It was quite cute, actually, but he didn't want Marinette to start feeling embarrassed because she just accidentally admitted that she always paid attention to him. She gave him a small smile, and once her blush had died down, Adrian reluctantly removed his hand from hers. Now wasn't the time for holding her hand. Or place, considering her dad could interrupt at any moment. Okay, so the next word in this sentence is 老师. This means teacher. So altogether we have Xianxiang, 你是老师, which means Mr. Agrest. You are a teacher. Marinette tapped her pen against the desk. I thought I was asking you questions to get to know you. You are. So to make this a question, we just add ma to the end. Neutral tone, and it makes it a question. But it can only be used if what you're asking will result in either a yes answer or a no answer. So if I ask you what day it is, I wouldn't put ma on the end because the answer wouldn't be yes or no. She hummed. It could be though. What do you mean? Well, if I was a stupid person and you asked me what day it was, I could just say yes. Would it be correct? No. But could I say it? Yes. Adrian just took a moment to stare at Marinette. He'd certainly never seen this side to her before. Why would you say yes or no to that question? Why not? He kept staring at her. What kind of student have I got? Hey, you just said I was really good at Mandarin. Yeah, I was exaggerating. Marinette folded her arms. I'll get my dad. Adrian copied her movements. Then if you get your dad, I'll get my dad. Don't be silly, he wouldn't show up. The two teenagers kept staring at each other, but then they finally burst into laughter. While Adrian wasn't very fond of how cold his dad was, he was so used to it now that it wasn't a sensitive topic for him anymore, and it just showed that if Marinette could say that to him, she was definitely feeling a lot more comfortable around him. Although he wasn't so sure where he could really go from here. He wanted to date her, and he knew she liked him back. But how did you go about asking a girl out? They wiped the tears from their eyes and both drank some water. Sorry, Marinette said as she put her glass back down. Did I offend you? Not at all. It was hilarious. Back to what I was saying though. Ma is used for yes or no questions, and can turn most statements into a question. So, Xianxiang, 你是老师 means Mr. Agrest, you are a teacher. But Xianxiang, 你是老师吗 means Mr. Agrest, are you a teacher? Oh, I see. Marinette started writing it down as he kept on explaining. In other languages, to ask a question like that, you often have to put the words in a different order, but here you don't. Just add ma, and it's a question. But you're not a teacher though, so you won't say yes. Correct. So we negate 是 with 不. 不是 means I'm not. So I'd say 我不是老师. I am not a teacher. 不 goes before 是. Marinette nodded, writing that down too. I'm guessing I can change 老师 for another noun, right? Yes, as soon as you learn them. Told you, you're a natural. He nudged her slightly with his elbow and Marinette blushed again. Thank you. So, you've asked if I'm a teacher. I said, no, I'm not a teacher. So now I'm going to say 我是学生. I am a student, Marinette guessed? Perfect. Then I would say 杜pencheng 小姐, Nina. Do you remember what that meant? Miss Du Pencheng, and you? You're asking me what my job is? Adrian nodded. So you'd say 我是学生? You got it. But because we're both students, let's make it more complex. She groaned. Do we have to? We have to. So let's say 我也是学生. Yeah means also. I am also a student. Oh, that wasn't so bad. Adrian frowned. You thought it was going to be? Well, you took so much delight in saying, hey, let's make it more difficult. Yes, I thought so. He laughed. All right, let's put it all together. You start. Marinette grabbed her notepad and turned in the chair to face Adrian. 先生, 你是老师吗? 我不是老师，我是学生。杜pencheng 小姐，你呢？我也是学生. Did I get that right? Adrian sucked in some air through his teeth. Well, that last bit was in English, so that bit wasn't, but the rest was. She glared at him. I hate you. He rested his head in the palm of his hand. I know you love me, really. Marinette blushed, but before they could continue the conversation, they were interrupted by someone clearing their throats. The two teenagers spun around and saw Sabine, and thankfully only Sabine, stood at the top of the stairs. Sorry, you two, but I was just wondering if you've heard back of Natalie, Adrian, she asked. Oh, let me check. Adrian grabbed his phone and smiled when he saw that Natalie had approved it. She said yes. Wonderful. Well, Tom and I are exhausted, so we were thinking of ordering pizza. What do you both want? Pepperoni, please, Marinette said. Me too, Adrian replied. And what kind of garlic bread? Cheesy, Marinette said at the same time Adrian said plain, and she glared at him. You've betrayed me. Oh, I'm sorry, but I do actually like to taste the garlic. Sabine just laughed. It's okay, we can order both. I like cheesy, Tom likes plain. Although I doubt he'll be happy to find out you have something in common. It'll be here for when you're done. She left, and Adrian and Marinette turned back to the desk. Are you okay to eat pizza, by the way, she asked. You know, being a model and all. It'll be fine this one time. I can't even remember the last time I ate pizza. I didn't even get to have it on my birthday. I really am sorry about that. With the scarf, I mean. Adrian just shook his head. It's fine, really. It still means a lot to me because it's a gift from you. Marinette blushed. Thank you. When's your birthday, he asked. Oh, it's not until May. Why? Well, I have to get you something, obviously. You really don't. Marinette. Adrian took her hand in his again. I want to. You mean a lot to me. Her blush got worse and she just smiled at him. She couldn't even begin to form actual coherent words right now. Had Adrian actually just said that to her? She was going to die. Right here. She was going to melt into a puddle and ruin Adrian's shoes. And what would he think of her then if she ruined his shoes? Although, to be fair, she would be dead, so it wouldn't matter what he thought of her. You okay to continue, he asked, and she just nodded. Any words that came out of her mouth right now would be a garbled mess. Alright, so now let's ask where each other is from. Same kind of structure, we'll start with 你是, you are, and then we'll say the country and then end with ma. Because in this instance, you're asking yes or no if they're from a certain country. I'm going to ask you if you're from France. So I'll say 你是法国人吗? Which word meant France? 法国人, Marinette said, thankfully finding her voice in time. Close. Just 法国 means France. 人 means person. So here we say French, but in Mandarin, it will literally translate to France person. 中国人, China person. 英国人, Britain person. We'd say Chinese and British, but they don't. She picked her pen up and started writing notes again. So, country, then person? You got it. So, altogether it's 你是法国人吗? Are you French? Or literally, are you a France person? Marinette smiled. I am a France person, as it goes. What do you think you'd say in response? She hummed and looked back at her notes. 我是法国人? Adrian gave her a bright smile. Nino had told him to guide Marinette and give her plenty of encouragement, and it was hardly any effort at all for him to do that. That'll work. But instead of Fargo, let's say Bali means Paris. So it's 我是巴黎人? I'm a Paris person. Adrian nodded as they both started laughing again. While he quite enjoyed studying Mandarin, having Natalie teach him had never been all that fun, but he was really enjoying this. And not just because he had feelings for Marinette. She had paid a lot of attention, and now she had got over her nerves, she was great to talk to and spend time with. Okay, and what would you ask me in return? Adrian asked. 你是法国人吗? 我是巴黎人. Okay, let's put it all together. Let's go from the top, talking about our jobs. Marinette grabbed her notepad and swiveled around to face Adrian. Are you sure about this? You're doing really well. I know you've got this. She smiled at him. Okay. Aggress 先生, 你是老师吗? 我不是老师, 我是学生. 杜penteng小姐, 你呢? 我也是学生. 你是法国人吗? 我是巴黎人. 杜penteng小姐, 我是法国人吗? 我是巴黎人? They both smiled at each other, and as Marinette lowered her notepad, Adrian's heart started to speed up. Was she going to hug him again? He really wanted her to. They had only hugged that once, and he'd relived that memory in his head so many times since then. Or maybe she was waiting until he was leaving after dinner to hug him. Or maybe she wouldn't at all, and he should initiate it. He didn't know what to do. Nino had given him 0 instructions on this part. Before he could make his mind up, though, all of the lights in the room shut off, leaving the 2 teenagers in complete darkness. What? Marinette started, confused, and Adrian grabbed his phone and put the torch on, then headed over to the nearest window. It was pitch black outside, and he sighed. Power cut. Everything's off. Marinette! Adrian! Sabine shouted from downstairs. 1 second, Mum. Marinette grabbed her phone and put the torch on too, but Adrian went to the stairs first and held out his hand to her. Take it. You're super clumsy even when you can see. She placed her hand in his, and she let Adrian carefully lead her back downstairs. Glad it was dark so he couldn't see her blush. This had to be a dream, or a parallel universe. He was holding her hand. Adrian Agreste was holding her hand. In what world would he ever do that? Unfortunately, Adrian let go of it when they reached the kitchen, and Sabine came in, holding the pizza boxes in one hand, her phone with the torch on in the other. It just arrived as the power went out. Adrian, there are some candles in the cupboard under the sink. Marinette, the lighter is in my bedroom. The teenagers separated, and as Adrian knelt down in front of the cupboards, his phone rang. It was Natalie. Hey Natalie, he said as he picked up, carefully moving aside the pans so he could get to the candles. Are you still at Marinette's? Are you safe there? She sounded a little worried. Everything's fine. We're about to eat, and we're just lighting some candles. Good, that's good. It's too dangerous to drive and pick you up with all the street lights out. Are you able to stay at Miss Dupencheng's until the power comes back on? Adrian looked over at Sabine, who was stood by the breakfast bar, opening up all of the pizza boxes. Sabine, is it okay if I stay until... She didn't even let him finish speaking. Of course it is, sweetheart. Even if you have to stay the night. He immediately blushed, not ready to imagine what spending the night at Marinette's would be like. Not that he would be sharing with Marinette. He'd probably sleep on one of the settees, and, okay, there was no point even thinking about this. Tom would make him sleep on the bakery floor to put as much distance as possible between him and his daughter. Thanks, he said, then put the phone back to his ear. I can stay. Wonderful. Just don't leave until we come to get you. Stay in the bakery. I will. Bye, Natalie. He hung up and grabbed all of the candles and put them on the breakfast bar just as Marinette came back in with the lighter, and the smell of pizza was starting to permeate in the room. God, it smelled so good. It really had been ages since he'd last eaten it. Marinette, could you get some water for the table? And Adrian, why don't you light some candles? He put 4 candles on the breakfast bar, 1 near each place setting, and just as Marinette brought the drinks over, Tom came into the room. Okay, everything's locked up. No one can get in, he said, sliding into one of the stools on the kitchen side of the bar. Sabine sat down in the stool at the head of the table, and Marinette and Adrian took the seats on the living room side. Okay, me and Marinette will share the cheesy garlic bread, Sabine said, and you and Adrian can share the plain one, Tom. The baker's glare managed to look menacing in the near dark. I see. It's like that, is it? Papa, Marinette said, her voice as deadpan as Natalie's usually was. Stop. Please. Adrian's here to help me. He's my friend. He would never hurt me. Tom glanced at Adrian, but clenched his jaw and ultimately said nothing. That was progress, right? The blonde model somehow doubted it, and while Marinette was right, he was here as a friend and to help her, he couldn't deny that he wanted more. And Tom probably knew that. Thankfully, once Tom had stopped glaring at him, Sabine filled the awkward silence by asking Adrian about his time in Shanghai. It's an amazing city. I love it, he told her. I think we're going again this summer. That's wonderful. Would it be okay if nearer the time I could give you a few things to give to my uncle? Sabine asked. It's been so long since I last saw him. He was meant to come to Paris for a cooking competition this year, but it got cancelled. Adrian smiled. Of course. Why don't you just come to Shanghai at the same time? Oh, we're saving for a trip, Marinette said. I've never been before. He just nodded, having forgotten how easy it was for him to go, well, anywhere he wanted if he was allowed. Marinette's family weren't in the same position. Well, I don't want to come across as arrogant, but we have a private jet. It wouldn't really cost us anything extra if the three of you were to come with me and my father this summer. I'd have to ask him, of course, but he's allowing me to stay with you during a power cut, so I'm sure he does trust you to some degree, and he usually goes to check the flagship stores and the couture pieces that are made in-house there. It's never really interested me, but perhaps I could ask if Marinette could tour around with him. He really likes her designs. He fumbled his way through it, not able to meet any of the Du Pencheng's eyes as he spoke. Adrian knew some people didn't like accepting help. It often hurt their pride. But being able to help Marinette see where part of her family came from would be amazing, and so would be helping her with her career aspirations. Adrian, Sabine started, and he was able to see the tears in her eyes even in the dim candlelight. That would be amazing. If your father says yes, of course. Marinette reached for his hand underneath the table and squeezed it. Thank you. He immediately blushed. It is no problem. I mean, he might say no. Thank you anyway. Surprisingly, it was Tom who said that, and the two men shared a smile. Once they finished eating, Marinette and Sabine went upstairs to light candles in Marinette's room, and Adrian and Tom cleared the table. I meant what I said, the baker said. Thank you for offering to try and do that. My wife misses her home, and Marinette has always wanted to visit to learn more about herself. Adrian nodded. I understand. And thank you for offering to help her with wanting to become a designer too. The blonde just shrugged as he carried the glasses over to the sink. I know how difficult it can be to get into the industry, but she works really hard and she deserves it. And there are very few people who can impress my father, me included. Adrian hadn't meant to sound so self-depreciating when he started speaking, but where his father was concerned, he sometimes couldn't help it. Tom went over to Adrian and placed a hand on his shoulder, surprising the younger boy. I'm sure he appreciates you in his own way. He perhaps just struggles in showing it. Adrian nodded, finding some truth in that. Things have been very difficult since his mum died. Adrian? Both men looked up and saw Sabine coming down the stairs, and Marinette peeking out of the hatch. Oh, 1 minute, Marinette, he said. I need to help with the washing up. Tom shook his head. Me and Sabine will do that. Go on, go upstairs. Adrian smiled at the baker. Thank you, Mr. Dupin. You can call me Tom. The model smiled even wider, and he walked upstairs without saying a word in case he ruined it all. Now that was progress. Well, it's not like he said, oh hey, you can call me by my first name now so you can date my daughter. But it was something. And it wouldn't really matter if Tom let him date Marinette if Adrian didn't know where to go from here. He loved spending time with her, and he really had nothing to lose since he knew Marinette had feelings for him too. But how did he show her he was interested? Was he supposed to just ask her out, completely out of the blue? He really needed Nino's advice again, which would be wonderful to have right now, because he was about to spend God knows how long with Marinette alone in her bedroom, and they wouldn't be studying. When he taught her Mandarin, it gave them a frame for conversation, but that wasn't the case now. Why was he such a social disaster? Marinette didn't feel all that much different. She didn't know when the power would turn back on. Adrian could be here for hours, and while she usually would have jumped at the prospect, she was starting to feel a little nervous about it. Could she really sustain conversation with him for that long? And what if he stayed over? They'd have to talk over breakfast too, but she bet he would look so cute with his hair, usually so perfect, all tousled from sleeping. Wait, now wasn't the time to think about that. She'd start blushing too much if she thought about that. She moved out of the way as Adrian came back into the room, and they left the hatch open as they went to sit back at the desk. Adrian had always liked how cosy Marinette's room was, but he liked it even more now. Most of the candles had been put on the desk, and it made that part of the room glow. Anything you want to do? He asked, feeling a little nervous. Marinette hummed and looked around. I would suggest teaching you how to sew, but the sewing machine needs electricity, and you need to be able to see pretty well for hand sewing. She looked back at Adrian. Maybe I could draw you? In truth, Marinette had drawn Adrian quite a few times now. Usually she'd done it in class or in the courtyard when he wasn't at an angle where he could see her, or she'd done it at home, using photos of him for reference. They'd all turned out pretty good, but she'd always wanted to draw him properly, when he could pose for her, and she had just enough light to draw. Adrian smiled. I'd love to. I am a model, after all. She let out a little laugh. Yes, you are. But maybe let's go for something more candid. Let me just get my things. Marinette grabbed her sketchpad and pencils, but soon started fumbling around. Was there something else you needed? Adrian asked. My clip. I usually clip my hair back for drawing. It gets in the way. What does it look like? I'll help look. Red with black spots? Adrian smiled. Like a ladybug. He stood up and started to look, being careful around the candles, and quickly found the clip beneath his Mandarin textbook. Oh, got it. They both sat back down, and Marinette held out her hand, expecting Adrian to hand the clip over. Instead, he ignored her hand and leant forwards, gently sweeping her fringe out of her face and clipping it up for her. He withdrew quickly, heeding what Nino had said and not going too far all at once, but it still affected Marinette. Her entire face went bright pink, but Adrian just smiled. She looked cute with her fringe up like that. Do you want to pose? Marinette stuttered, her hand shaking slightly as she flipped to a new page in her sketchpad. Had Adrian Agreste actually just done that? She was living in a dream. She had to be. There was no other explanation for what had just happened. Adrian crossed his legs at the ankles, then leant his elbow against the desk, curled his hand into a fist, and leant his head against it. Is this okay? Marinette nodded and started to sketch, getting the basic shapes of his proportions down before she started adding the detail. The fact she had been given permission to openly stare at Adrian like this was amazing in of itself. Am I allowed to talk? He whispered, and Marinette nodded. Sorry, I guess this must be boring for you. Tell me about yourself. Don't you already know enough? She hummed. I guess. Then tell me something I don't know. Adrian thought for a moment, listening to Marinette's light pencil scratches against the page. Something she didn't know. He had done so many interviews over the years. The people of France knew a lot about him, apart from how he felt for Marinette. But he didn't think now was the right time to tell her. He knew she had feelings for him, but what if for whatever reason she rejected him? He wouldn't want to be stuck here for a few hours with that between them. Finally, he said, I like to read. Marinette nodded, glancing up at him. I didn't know that. What do you like to read? Coming-of-age stories, about children finding themselves as they become adults. My favourite book is called The Stolen Bicycle by Wu Bingyi. It's Taiwanese. This boy, well, he's a man now, but when he's a child, his dad gets on their family bike one day and leaves. And when he grows up, the boy decides that if he can find the bike, then he can find his father. He travels around Taiwan, following leads on the bike. It's a lucky bike, that's the name of the brand, and they don't make them anymore. So the bike is easy to spot. You learn a lot about the history of Taiwan. Did you know they used to make pictures out of butterfly wings? Marinette looked up at him with a frown. That's kind of gross. Yeah, I guess. There was this other story in it. During the war, they killed a lot of the more dangerous zoo animals in case fighting damaged the enclosures and the animals got out and hurt people. They were going to kill this elephant, but they decided not to. In the city the zoo was in, tunnels had been built underground for when this prince had visited. If anything bad happened, like an assassination attempt, the prince and his bodyguard could escape into the tunnels to be safe. But the tunnels had never been filled in, so a zookeeper took the elephant down there and they stayed together. What happened? The city got bombed and the tunnels caved in. The zookeeper died instantly. Marinette stopped drawing. And the elephants? Adrian smiled. Alive. She returned his smile. That's good. If she was being honest, she could listen to Adrian talk for hours about books. His voice was so calming and gentle. It reminded her of that day beneath the umbrella, when she had fallen in love with him. The lights picked that moment to flicker back on, and as soon as they did, Adrian's phone rang, breaking the moment. Hey, Natalie. Yeah, I'm safe. Yeah, okay. I'll see you in a few minutes. Marinette put her sketchpad down and Adrian looked at the unfinished drawing. It's really good. I'm sorry you couldn't finish it. It's okay. I think I can finish it from memory. Let's blow out the candles. They took each end of the desk, blowing out candles, and they worked their way to the middle. They reached the last candle at the same time, but when neither one backed off, they ended up blowing it out together. Their proximity left the two teenagers staring at each other with wide eyes, hearts pounding in their chest. They were too close. Adrian, Tom shouted. Natalie's here. They sprung apart and Adrian went right for his textbook. I'll just pack my things away. And I'll wait for you downstairs. Marinette swiftly left the room, and once she had gone, Adrian slumped back down into his chair. He wasn't sure what exactly that was. Should he have kissed her? Or should he have asked her out first? Did you not kiss someone until you were dating? Did you kiss them on the first dates? No? God, Adrian needed some help. Or he was going to ruin his and Marinette's relationship before it got started. He quickly packed everything away, and when he was sure he'd got everything, he started to make his way downstairs. What if he says no, he heard Marinette say, her voice quiet. Adrian heard Sabine sigh. Why would he? Just ask him. The model got to the last set of stairs then, and the two women looked up at him, both smiling. Adrian, Sabine said, please tell your father that you're welcome for dinner any time. And so is he. He just laughed as he got closer to them. Yeah, I'll tell him. And don't worry if he says no about Shanghai. We'll go one day. Marinette grabbed an umbrella from by the door. It started raining. I'll walk you to the car. Adrian nodded, grabbed his fencing bag, and waved goodbye to Sabine as Marinette led the way from the door and towards the car, both of them under the umbrella. Marinette was smaller than him, so he was craning his neck a little, but he didn't mind. He loved being under an umbrella with her. He looked at the handle and smiled when he recognised it. You kept it? Of course I did. Would you like it back? Adrian shook his head. Keep it. I gave it to you for a reason. What were you talking to your mum about? Oh, well, I know your dad will be the one deciding about Shanghai. You just offered, but it was extremely generous. And we all wanted to thank you for teaching me, so she wanted me to invite you to come with us to London over Easter. There was no stopping the smile that spread over Adrian's face. Seriously? Marinette nodded, and then Adrian was hugging her. She stood still for a moment, not sure what to do, then wrapped the arm that wasn't holding the umbrella around him. They'd only hugged once before, at the end of their last lesson. She had just been so excited that she'd done it on impulse, but now he was doing the same, and she couldn't deny that she loved the feeling of his arms around her. He made her feel safe. So, is that a yes? She mumbled against his chest. He pulled away with a laugh. Of course it's a yes. I'd love to go with you. He never got to go on holiday with a friend, and to get to go with Marinette, it was a dream come true. I guess you'll need to talk to your father and stuff, but as soon as you know, text me so we can book the train and stuff. Of course. And please tell your parents thank you for inviting me. That chat with Tom really had paid off. Marinette led the rest of the way to the car and Adrian opened the door, and he turned back to her with a smile. I'll see you tomorrow at school. She nodded, but then frowned, the shadows the umbrella was casting on her face making her look sadder than she actually was. What's wrong? He asked. I was just wondering, in that book you told me about, did the boy find his dad? With a solemn smile, Adrian shook his head and climbed into the car. He watched as Marinette stepped away from the curb, and she waved to him as the car pulled away. Did you have a nice time? Natalie asked, staring at him in the rearview mirror. The best. He'd ask about London and Shanghai later. Right now, he was just ecstatic at the thought of going away with Marinette, even if it didn't end up happening.